You didn't end up here randomly. Think about that for a second. Out of the endless stream of videos, distractions, and noise on the internet, something guided you to this exact moment, this exact message, right now. And that isn't an accident. When a major shift in reality is about to lock into place, the universe doesn't stay silent. It leaves signals, patterns, small disturbances in the normal flow of life that feel impossible to ignore. What you're experiencing right now might not be preparation for a breakthrough. It might actually be the final stage after the breakthrough has already been created. And that difference changes everything. Because most people believe transformation is something that slowly approaches from the future. But in quantum mechanics, the process works differently. The change happens first in the field of possibility, and only later does the physical world begin to catch up. Which means by the time you start noticing the signs, the decision has already been made at a deeper level of reality. In other words, the shift isn't coming. It's already been set in motion. And if this idea hits you in a strange way, if something inside you feels like it recognizes what I'm saying, take a second and press the like button. Not just for the algorithm, but as a signal to yourself that you're ready to see this process clearly. Also, if you're someone who enjoys exploring how consciousness and quantum reality intersect, ideas that actually change the way you experience life, make sure you subscribe. Because once you understand how these mechanisms work, you start noticing them everywhere. Now here's the part almost nobody talks about. The final stage before a breakthrough often feels like the worst part of the entire journey. It's confusing, exhausting, sometimes even painful. Imagine running a marathon. You can see the finish line in front of you. You know you're close, but every time you push forward, it somehow feels like the distance isn't shrinking. Your legs burn, your lungs tighten, and part of you wonders if you misjudged the entire race. That's exactly how this phase of transformation feels. One moment you're filled with absolute certainty that everything is changing. You see strange coincidences. You feel glimpses of the future you've been trying to build. It's almost like you can step into it for a few seconds and experience what life will feel like on the other side. But then, hours later, doubt crashes back in. Old problems appear, unexpected stress shows up. Bills, arguments, frustrations, things that belong to your old life suddenly feel louder than ever. And your mind starts whispering dangerous questions. What if I imagined all of this? What if none of it is real? What if I've been fooling myself the entire time? And that internal conflict drains you, because you've already been doing the work. You've tried to think differently, you've visualized the future, you've practiced meditation, you've repeated affirmations, you've tried to align your thoughts, your emotions, your energy. After a while, it becomes exhausting. There comes a moment when you feel like you can't hold that higher state for even one more day. Part of you just wants to give up. Not because you stopped believing, but because the effort itself has worn you down. And here is the crucial thing to understand. That exhaustion doesn't mean you failed. In fact, according to the physics of how reality forms, that feeling is often the strongest indicator that the process is reaching completion. There's a concept in quantum physics called decoherence. It describes the moment when a field of infinite possibilities collapses into one single outcome that becomes physically real. Before that collapse happens, there's a strange transitional period. The old looks blank, nothing is visible. Then looks blank, nothing is visible. Then slowly, faint shapes begin to appear. The old blank surface is fading while the new image is forming. But for a few moments, both states exist at the same time. That blurry in-between stage is where you are right now. Your old reality hasn't completely disappeared yet, but the new one is already forming underneath it, and the tension you feel is the friction between those two worlds. That's why your emotions can swing so wildly during this phase. One moment everything feels aligned. The next moment everything feels chaotic. It's not because the process stopped working. It's because two different versions of reality are trying to occupy the same space at once. To understand this better, imagine that your future, the life you've been moving toward, is locked inside an enormous vault. For months, maybe years, you've been slowly turning the combination lock. Each decision you made, each belief you changed, each moment you chose growth over comfort, that was another number in the sequence. Click, another number, click. Eventually, the correct sequence is entered. But here's the part people misunderstand. Once the correct combination is set, you don't keep spinning the dial. The system inside the vault begins its own internal mechanism. Heavy bolts move. Internal gears align. Massive components slide into position, and each time one of those pieces locks into place, you hear a deep, powerful sound. Click, click, click. The strange events happening in your life right now, the chaos, the coincidences, the unexpected quiet moments, those are the sounds of that mechanism completing its sequence. They are not interruptions, they are confirmations. By the end of this video, you're going to understand the 3 unmistakable markers that show when this final sequence is happening. Once you recognize them, the anxiety disappears. Because instead of wondering whether the breakthrough is coming, you begin to see the evidence that it has already begun unfolding. And when that realization lands fully, something powerful happens inside you. You stop chasing the future, you start recognizing the reality that is already arriving. And that shift from chasing to recognizing is the moment everything begins to lock into place. To really understand what's happening, you have to accept one uncomfortable truth. A reality shift isn't a single moment. It's a process. It's not like a light switch flipping from dark to bright. It's more like one sun setting while another rises. There's a stretch of time where everything looks strange. Shadows get longer, shapes feel uncertain, and your mind hates that stage because it wants clean answers. At the quantum level, your current life is a very stable pattern. It's a set frequency you've been broadcasting for years, maybe decades. Your routines, your relationships, your self-image, your fears, your expectations, but all of it keeps that frequency running like a loop. That's why your old reality feels so solid even if you don't like it. It's familiar. It's rehearsed. It's been repeated enough times that it became the default. But through your inner work, through your attention, your emotional focus, your choices, you initiated something rare. You started broadcasting a new signal. At first it was weak, almost invisible. Just a quiet pull under the noise of the old life. A maybe, a desire, a vision you could barely hold on to, but you fed it. You kept returning to it, you imagined it, you embodied it, you reached for it again and again. And over time, that new signal grew strong enough to challenge the old one. And when two powerful frequencies collide in the same space, they don't just blend peacefully, they create interference. Think of two radio stations fighting on the same channel. One moment you hear the song clearly, the next moment it turns into static, then it clears again, then it breaks apart again. That's your life right now. One moment you get a clean download from the future, an undeniable synchronicity, an insight, a calm certainty that feels like truth. Then the next moment the old reality fights back. You're hit with old emotions, old limitations, old patterns. It feels like everything is collapsing, like you're being pulled backwards. But you're not being pulled backwards. You're listening to interference. You're living in the overlap between two timelines, one dissolving, one forming. And that overlap is what I call the Quantum Finalization Sequence. It's not a spiritual test. It's not the universe playing games with you. It's a protective process. Reality has to stabilize before it becomes your dominant experience. The field doesn't just drop you into a new life without structural integrity. It verifies the connection, clears the old framework, and recalibrates you to the new baseline so you can actually sustain it. This sequence has 3 stages. They happen in order. And once you see them clearly, you stop misreading everything. Stage 1 is dissolution. Stage 2 is frequency verification. Stage 3 is 0-point recalibration, the void. Now, before I break these down, you need to understand why this phase feels so intense. Your nervous system is not trained to interpret quantum mechanics. It's trained to interpret survival. So when the finalization sequence starts, your biology does what it has always done. It treats chaos as danger. It treats loss as threat. It treats stillness as something is wrong. That's why your mind starts screaming. This is failing. This is getting worse. This is proof I was wrong. But that's not truth. That's programming. Because from a quantum perspective, what looks like things falling apart is often the exact sign that the new reality is strong enough to dissolve the old one. Let me be direct. Stage 1, dissolution, often looks like loss. A job you thought was permanent ends. A relationship you believed would last suddenly cracks. A belief you built your identity on stops making sense. And your survival mind panics. It calls it failure. It says, you're moving away from what you want. But the quantum truth is the opposite. The higher frequency reality you've anchored is incompatible with the old structure. The old timeline has attachments, tethers that keep you locked into the previous pattern, and those tethers can't come with you. So the system dismantles them. It's not punishment, it's demolition. And if you look closely, dissolution has a signature. Yes, it can feel scary, but under the fear, there's often an eerie sense of inevitability. And even relief, like something heavy finally got removed, even if you didn't know how badly you were carrying it. That's how you recognize it. It doesn't feel like a random tragedy. It feels like the universe saying, this can't stay if you're going where you're going. Here's a quick example. Imagine someone who's been building a perfect life on paper. Stable career, respect, money, yet deep down they feel empty. Their real desire is something completely different. Freedom, creativity, a new path. They do the inner work for years. They reach a point where the new life feels real inside them. And then suddenly, their job disappears. A restructure, a surprise layoff, a door slams shut. The logical mind calls it disaster. But inside, beneath the panic, there's a quiet whisper. Finally. That whisper is the truth. Dissolution is the clearing of the construction site. You are not watching your life break. You are watching the old framework get removed so the new one can stand without interference. So I want you to think for a moment. What's been shaking lately? What's been unstable? What's been falling apart in a way that also feels like it might be making space? Because if you can reframe dissolution correctly, you stop trying to desperately repair the old structure while the new one is forming around you. And when you stop repairing what's meant to dissolve, the entire sequence speeds up. After dissolution clears the space, the second stage of the quantum finalization sequence begins. And this stage is far more subtle, but once you recognize it, it becomes impossible to ignore. This stage is what I call frequency verification. This is when your future reality begins quietly reaching back toward your present awareness. Not with dramatic miracles or fireworks, but with small, precise signals. Synchronicities, symbols, conversations, numbers, encounters that feel strangely aligned with the life you're moving toward. At first they might appear random, a coincidence here, a strange connection there, but then they start happening again, and again, and again. You think about a certain place and suddenly you see its name everywhere. You consider a new career direction and suddenly everyone you meet works in that field. You begin imagining a new chapter of life, and suddenly music lyrics, books, and conversations start mirroring that exact vision. Most people misread these moments. They think they're magical hints or rewards from the universe. But that interpretation actually keeps them in the wrong role, because what's really happening is much more precise. These are information transmissions. Your future reality is sending small signals into your current environment to confirm that the connection between timelines is stable. Think of it like a radar system or sonar. The signal goes out, bounces off your awareness, and confirms the pathway is clear. And here's the surprising part. When this stage begins, the signals often feel strangely neutral. You might expect them to feel exciting, emotional, almost mystical. But instead, many people notice the opposite. They observe the synchronicities calmly, almost like they're watching data arrive rather than miracles happening. That neutrality is actually one of the strongest confirmations you can receive. Why? Because strong emotional reactions usually happen when something feels distant or improbable. When something feels rare, your brain floods with excitement. But when something starts to feel normal, when your subconscious begins accepting it as part of reality, the emotional spike disappears. It just becomes information. Imagine someone planning to move to a small coastal town. They've visualized it, felt it, imagined life there until it feels natural. Then suddenly strange things begin happening. They walk past a travel agency and the window poster features that exact town. They turn on the radio and a song from that region starts playing. A friend messages them unexpectedly saying they've been learning the language spoken there. Later that day, they open a book and the story takes place in that same location. One signal might feel like coincidence, but when 5, 10, 20 signals appear, it becomes statistically impossible to ignore. Yet instead of feeling shocked or overwhelmed, the person simply notices. Interesting. There it is again. No fireworks, no disbelief, just calm observation. That calm reaction means the subconscious mind has already accepted the new reality as normal. The connection is stabilizing. Think about it like tuning a radio. At first you hear static. Then the station begins to come through faintly. Then the signal becomes clear enough that you recognize the music. But there's one more stage before the sound becomes perfectly stable. And that stage is the one that confuses people the most. Because after dissolution and frequency verification, something unexpected happens. Everything goes quiet. The synchronicities slow down. The chaos settles. The emotional intensity fades. Suddenly it feels like nothing is happening anymore. And this is the stage where many people panic. They assume the connection was lost. They believe the process stopped working. They think the silence means they failed somehow. But this silence has a name. It's called the void. And the void is not a failure. It's the final recalibration before the new reality fully stabilizes. Imagine the moment between breathing in and breathing out. That tiny pause where everything becomes completely still. Or imagine a concert hall just before the orchestra begins. The musicians are ready. The audience is silent. The conductor lifts the baton. And for 1 second, the entire room holds its breath. That stillness is not emptiness. It's potential gathering itself. The void works the same way. In this phase, the old reality has already dissolved enough that it no longer dominates your life. But the new reality hasn't fully materialized yet. So the system pauses. Your inspiration might disappear for a while. Motivation drops. Synchronicities fade. Even your emotional reactions become neutral. It can feel like standing in an empty room where nothing is moving. But that empty room is actually the cleared foundation where the next structure will rise. There's a story about an artist who spent months preparing for a major exhibition. She worked constantly, painting, planning, imagining the moment when everything would finally come together. And then suddenly, nothing. For 3 weeks, she couldn't even look at a canvas. Her ideas vanished. Her passion disappeared. She was convinced she had lost her creative gift forever. So she stopped trying. She rested. She allowed the silence. And in that quiet space, something unexpected happened. A completely new style appeared in her mind, fully formed, unlike anything she had ever created before. Soon after, a gallery owner who had never contacted her before reached out and offered her an exhibition, saying they were looking specifically for something bold and different. The void wasn't the end of her creativity. It was the reset before the next level emerged. So if you're in that stage right now, if everything feels strangely calm, neutral, almost paused, don't rush to fill the silence, because the void is not empty. It's the moment when reality is recalibrating itself to match the version of you that already changed. And the more calmly you allow that recalibration to happen, the faster the next phase begins. Now here is the realization that changes everything about this entire process. Most people believe they are still trying to create their breakthrough. They think they're the one pushing the process forward, holding the vision, maintaining the vibration, forcing their mind to stay positive so the future can finally arrive. But the truth is much stranger than that. By the time you reach the stage we've been talking about, the dissolution, the resonance, the void, the act of creation has already happened. The real event already took place at the quantum level. The moment you fully embodied the feeling of your new reality, even if it was only for a few seconds, the quantum wave of possibilities collapsed into a single outcome. That was the moment the decision was made in the field of reality itself. From that instant forward, the structure of your future began organizing itself automatically. What you're experiencing now isn't the act of creation. You're experiencing the delay. Think about thunder and lightning. When lightning strikes, the event has already happened. But the sound of thunder takes time to reach you because sound travels slower than light. You hear the thunder after the lightning, even though the lightning caused it. Your breakthrough works the same way. The quantum event, the real decision, already occurred in the invisible layer of reality. The physical world is simply catching up. That means the strange signals in your life right now are not instructions telling you what to do next. They're echoes. They're the sound of reality rearranging itself around a decision that has already been made. And once you understand this, something inside you relaxes for the first time in a long while. Because the exhausting idea that you must constantly hold the vibration or perfectly control every thought suddenly disappears. You don't have to maintain a frequency through sheer force of will. That guidance has caused more burnout in people than almost anything else in the world of manifestation. Trying to hold a mental state 24 hours a day is like trying to keep a beach ball permanently underwater. The moment you stop pushing, it pops back up. But the good news is, you don't have to hold it down anymore. The frequency of your new reality is already holding itself in place. Your job now is simply to remember it exists. You don't generate it from nothing. You return to it. Another important realization comes from this. The chaos, the losses, the synchronicities, even the silence, none of them are tests. The universe isn't checking if you're worthy. It isn't giving you signs to see if you react the right way. That idea assumes reality is some kind of judge waiting to grade your performance. But the quantum field doesn't work like that. These events are simply the physics of transition. They are the leftover fragments of the old timeline dissolving while the new one stabilizes. Think of them as receipts, proof that a transaction has already been completed. A package has already been shipped. The tracking notifications are just updates letting you know it's moving through the system. And that leads to the most powerful shift you can make during this stage. Instead of trying to force the future to appear, you begin recognizing that it has already been authorized. The train has already changed tracks. You're not pushing the engine forward anymore. You're the passenger feeling the motion as the train gathers speed, and because the direction has already been set, something else becomes clear. Even the things that look like setbacks are actually signs of progress. When a piece of your old life suddenly breaks apart, a job ending, a connection fading, a belief collapsing, it doesn't mean you're moving backward. It means the frequency of your new reality has become strong enough to break the structures that belong to the previous one. The old foundation has to crack so the new structure can stand. And here's another truth that surprises people when they hear it. At this stage, you can't actually ruin the process. The fear of self-sabotage is often the last ghost of the old mindset. People worry that one negative thought, one bad day, one moment of doubt will destroy everything they've worked for. But that's not how reality works. A single passing thought cannot undo months or years of internal transformation. Old doubts may still appear sometimes. Old fears might pass through your mind like echoes from a previous life. But they only gain power if you decide to believe them again. Think of it like receiving mail at an old address. The letters still arrive because the system hasn't fully updated yet. But if you've already moved to a new home, those letters don't control your life anymore. They're just leftovers from a place you no longer live. And that realization brings us to the final shift required during this stage. It's not a shift in what you do. It's a shift in who you believe you are. As long as you see yourself as a seeker, someone still searching for the breakthrough, you keep reinforcing the idea that the reality you want is still missing. A seeker is someone who hasn't found what they're looking for yet. But if the process has already completed at the quantum level, that identity no longer fits you. You're not the seeker anymore. You're the resident, the person who lives in the reality that has already been created. A seeker constantly asks, "Is it working yet?" A resident simply observes events and says, "Of course it is." A seeker performs rituals hoping something will happen. A resident performs rituals as a natural expression of a life that already exists. A seeker lives in hope. A resident lives in knowing. Think about someone moving into a new house. Before they arrive, they're imagining the place, planning the rooms, hoping everything will work out. But once the keys are in their hand and the door opens, something changes. They stop imagining the house. They start living in it. That is the identity shift happening for you right now. You're no longer the person standing outside the door wondering if the vault will open. You're the owner walking through the rooms of a mansion that has always belonged to you. And when that identity fully settles inside you, the final stage of this transition becomes incredibly simple. You stop trying to make reality happen, and you start learning how to live inside the one that already arrived. So now we arrive at the final piece of this entire process. If the new reality has already been generated, if the vault has already been unlocked, then the question is no longer how do I make it happen? The real question becomes something very different. How do you live from it? Because once a new reality begins stabilizing, your role changes. You're no longer the builder trying to force the structure into existence. You become the steward of something that already exists. Think about the difference between an architect and the person who lives in the house the architect designed. The architect plans, calculates, draws blueprints, and supervises construction. That's the phase of manifestation most people focus on. But once the house is finished, the architect leaves. The person who remains is the one who walks the halls, opens the windows, takes care of the space, and allows life to unfold inside it. That is the stage you are entering now. You move from the effort of becoming into the quiet confidence of being. And there are 3 simple practices that help stabilize this new reality faster than anything else. The first practice is something called conscious acknowledgement. For a long time you were searching for signs, hoping for evidence, wondering if the universe was responding to your intention. That phase is over. Now when an indicator appears, a synchronicity, a symbol, an unexpected opportunity, or even the collapse of something that belonged to your old life, you don't just notice it and move on. You pause. You take one calm breath and acknowledge it, not with excitement or disbelief, but with the quiet certainty of someone who expected the system to work. Something simple like, acknowledged. The sequence is stabilizing. That moment of calm recognition does something powerful. In quantum physics, there's a concept called the observer effect. When attention is applied to a system, it influences the outcome. Your focused awareness acts like a stabilizing force that helps the new reality collapse into physical form more quickly. So instead of reacting like someone surprised by success, you respond like someone who knew it was coming. The second practice is what I call timeline filtering. Even though the new reality is stabilizing, the old one may still echo for a while. Old worries might appear. Old fears might drift through your mind. Memories from the previous life might show up unexpectedly. The mistake many people make is panicking when that happens. They think, I'm thinking negatively again. I'm going to ruin everything. But those thoughts are not new creations. They're simply echoes, fragments of the previous timeline still passing through the system. Think of them like old emails in an archive. The messages are still there, but they no longer require your attention. When one of those thoughts appears, you don't fight it and you don't feed it. You simply recognize it for what it is. An old signal. Then you gently return your focus to the present moment and the reality you're now living in. The more calmly you do this, the faster the old patterns lose their influence. The third practice is something surprisingly simple yet incredibly powerful. It's called an integration ritual. Your subconscious mind accepts something as real only when it becomes normal. Not dramatic, not magical, normal. That's why repetition is so powerful. By creating a small daily action that represents your new reality, you slowly teach your subconscious that this life isn't a dream.